Hello and welcome to the Art of Being Human. The last segment I talked about medications and a little bit about the problems that we're running into, and I think that I do want to kind of cap that off a little bit. I think I have read, now if I'm wrong I want you to correct me because I need to know for sure, because I don't want to give you any false information, but I've read that the donut hole closes next year for people who are on Medicare Part D, and that as the donut hole closes, there won't be any more coverage gap. And then if that's the case, and I think it's supposed to be next year, if that is the case, then you would be paying a certain percentage, like a fourth of what your prescription cost or something like that. I read it in an article and I wanted to save the article. I think it was from AARP, and I don't remember where I put it. So at any rate, I may or may not be wrong about that. And I know when I said something about the legislature putting a cap on the cost of medications, I know that in terms of rent, in the Boston area a few years ago, the rent was going so sky high that the government put a cap on it, and that people could not give exceedingly high rent bills to people who were moving into new apartments. There was a limit as to how high the rent could get. I don't think those apply now. I think that those caps have been taken off. But it is possible to control it when things get too high. I think it's a crime that in this country people can't afford to get the medications that they need. So I do have a prediction, and my prediction is that I think that as medications get higher and higher, people are going to turn to alternative forms of therapy, alternative forms of medications such as herbs and things like that to seek help, but maybe in a less expensive way. Now, herbs can be very expensive too, but I do want to deal with herbs first. The thing you've got to remember about herbs, I think if you can heal yourself or if they can heal you, you can take certain things like St. John's wort that is used a lot by menopausal women that seems to help them. If you can help yourself by using something that's natural, then that's a very good thing, but you do have to be careful of some things. Herbs are very potent and they're very powerful, and they interact with each other, and they interact with other medications over the counter or prescription that you may be taking. So you've got to be very careful because you don't know what those interactions are. If you're taking an herb, it might interact and cancel out the benefits of another medication or herb that you're taking, or they may enhance it and make it stronger, or it can mix in such a way that can actually become poisonous and dangerous. You have to be very, very, very careful of what you take. And you have to be careful of the dosages as well. But you need to remember that herbs were the only way that people got well years and years ago. This is what medications were. You take so much of this, you take so much of that, and you can get rid of your cold or your earache or your sore throat or whatever it was. And that's how they healed themselves. They didn't necessarily go to physicians at that time, and physicians used them too in order to help people to get well. But you have to be careful, and I'm going to tell you a couple of scary stories. You have to be very, very careful of dosages because you can get yourself in trouble. This is a true case. It was fairly recent. There's a woman who got the flu. She didn't go to a doctor. She had the flu symptoms. She didn't go to a doctor, but what she did do was decide to take over-the-counter pain medications. You know, you can get the ibuprofen, the acetaminophen, and all of that. And I'm not sure which one she took. I think I know which one, but I don't want to mention it on television because I'm not exactly sure. Well, she got too much. I know for some of those medications, pain medications that you take over the counter, you can only take 1 or 2 or 3 a day. In one case, 2-3 times a day. One case, you can only take 3 pills a day, and you have to space them out. So, I mean, you can buy them, and they are effective. And she thought with the flu symptoms, they surely would help her with the flu symptoms, but she got too much. And I don't know, you know, if you're taking like a medication for pain, and you're using it for the flu, and then you take a cold remedy, If you have a bad cold, well, that cold remedy may have the same medication as you took. It's not unusual to find acetaminophen and other of those painkillers in cold medications. So she might have been double dosing without realizing that she was double dosing. However she did it, and I'm only speculating because I don't know exactly how she did it, but what she did was she took too much. And then after the flu subsided, she got very sick and she nearly died. What she went into was complete liver failure because she'd taken too much of an over-the-counter painkiller. Or complete kidney failure. If you overdose on those painkillers that you can get over the counter without a prescription because you don't follow the dosage or you take too much over a period of time, you can have a liver shutdown or a kidney shutdown. It's very, very serious. It can cost your life. And what happened in her case is that she was fortunate enough to be able to get a transplant. I think it was some part of a liver transplant that she got, and that saved her life, so she didn't die. But now, of course, she's going to have to take anti-rejection medication for the rest of her life. So by all means, before you take anything over the counter, make sure you are taking only the prescribed dose. And if you're taking 2 or 3 things, make sure you're not accidentally overdosing, because the things that you're taking, cold medications or whatever, may have the same medication in it as you're taking from an over-the-counter medication for pain. So you can easily overdose and never realize that you're doing it. So it's best not to take pain medications if you can possibly get over it without it. If you can use hot water bottles or heating pads or whatever. And there are non-medication ways to help you with pain. But at any rate, that's one of the stories that I have to tell you. And there is another one. A few years ago, there were a group of people who decided to go in and go on a health regimen. And that health regimen, and I'm not going to tell you the name of it, but you had drank 2 smoothies a day with substances, powders and stuff that you mixed up at home, and 1 meal a day. And it was supposed to give you all kinds of energy, and you're supposed to feel wonderful and all of that. So a group of people tried it, and for a while they did feel pretty good. Then some of them really got sick. They got sick and they had to stop using it because they felt absolutely miserable. And it turned out that the smoothies were loaded with iron. Now, not everybody needs iron, and a lot of people think that if they're anemic, that they should load up on the iron pills. But not all anemia is caused by iron deficiency. If your anemia is caused by iron deficiency, the doctor will tell you, because he will know, he's got the blood test, he will be able to tell you that that's the reason. But if your iron deficiency is caused by something else and it's not caused, if your anemia is caused by something else and it's not caused by iron deficiency, if you take too much iron to try to build up because you think you're iron deficiency, you can get poisoned by it. You can get very sick on it. So if you are anemic or think you're anemic and you're tired, there are many, many causes of that. And there are different types of anemia. You need to go and get medically checked out and find out what is happening with your body, because a doctor will know, and they'll be able to tell from simple blood tests what's going on with you, and they will be able to prescribe what you need. Don't just assume you know what's wrong with you if you haven't been medically checked out, because you could be filling up with something that's going to hurt you in the long run, and you never know it until it's too late. If you're using herbs are powerful, as I said before. They can interact with medications that you are taking. They can interact with each other if you're taking more than one herb. You need to go to a person that knows what they're doing, that's trained in it, and there are a lot of people who get trained just in how to use herbs, so you wouldn't necessarily even go to a doctor for that. But if you are taking herbs, you need to know what goes well with what you shouldn't take with what. I mentioned St. John's wort last segment, helping people with menopause, and it does help people with menopause. The problem is not all women with menopause should take it. There are some people with certain conditions that definitely should stay away from St. John's wort. But would you know that? You wouldn't know that unless you talked to somebody who knew herbs and knew you and knew what your medical conditions were and would be able to make a recommendation as to what you use and what you don't use. And I notice, and I'm glad for this, that a lot of doctors now deal with both. I've known doctors who deal with medicine, Western style medicine using herbs, and they know how to juggle it so that you can use maybe even both. And so that's important, to be able to get somebody on your healthcare team that really knows what they're doing, so you don't end up by hurting yourself without realizing that you're hurting yourself. When you're buying herbs, do you know how much of that herb you're really getting? Well, sometimes you do, because it's going to be clearly marked on a bottle, but if it's not, you don't know how much you're getting. And you also don't know what it's mixed with, you know, and that's important too. The difference between the less expensive drugs and the regular drugs, you know, the generics and the regular drugs, is how it's formulated and what the fillers are. Why would they use fillers? Well, for color. To hold the medication together so they can give it without it's falling apart. I mean, ease of swallowing. There's a lot of reasons why fillers would be used, and they're needed, but you need to know that different drugs and different companies use different fillers. So what is good for one company to use, maybe another company uses something different, and you may react differently to each one. It's very, very complicated. Medications are very, very complicated, and I just give you these heads up, not to scare you, but to make you realize that you really need to know what you're doing before you just jump in and say, well, I'm going to take this, or I'm going to take iron. I must be anemic. I'm tired, so give me more and more iron, when maybe you have enough iron in your system already, and taking more will make you sicker rather than more well. So you need to remember that. You don't know what herbs are interacting with what medications and what herbs are acting with what herbs. So the medications that you're taking may not be exactly what you need. Now, I think what I'm going to do is go on to the drugs themselves. The word drug refers to medications which are substances that cure or arrest illnesses. They either relieve symptoms, take symptoms away, or ease pain. And there are other benefits as well. So I want to read that once again. The word drug refers to medications that are substances that cure or make diseases less, or make you more comfortable, ease your pain, or ease your symptoms. That includes vitamins, minerals, which are essential to health, and they may be given also to correct deficiencies. If you have a deficiency in a certain vitamin or a deficiency in some substance, a doctor may give you a pill to boost you up, to take care of the deficiency, so they can be used for that as well. Now, drugs with less potential to cause harm can be sold over the counter. Drugs are classed into certain groups according to how easy it is to get addicted to them. If it's not too easy to get addicted to a drug, then they may sell it over the counter, and you may not even need a prescription to get it, such as pain medications. I mean, they may have other effects if you overuse them. You may go into liver failure or something like that. But in terms of addiction itself, if a drug is deemed not a danger to become addicted to, they will sell it over the counter. More powerful drugs need to have prescriptions and supervision, and the prescriptions can last for a certain amount of time. You may find on your prescription bottle something that says can be refilled 3 times before, and then a date is given, because the drug may be dangerous if you refill it more than that time. It may be a little easier to become addicted to, so therefore it's classed in a way that they can only prescribe it and only refill it a certain amount of times before a certain date. This is to protect you from being addicted to the drug. So it is a good thing. Drugs that cause dependence usually cannot be obtained legally. You know, people try to get illegal drugs all the time. That's why they go to things like fentanyl. There are drugs out that people have created that are so dangerous that first responders have to wear masks to help a person who's overdosed, because they're so strong that even breathing the fumes or touching a drug with your fingers, it goes into your system, and you are now have a drug in your system just through touch or through breathing. So the drugs are now very sophisticated, and people are creating drugs that are illegal and should never be used. It used to be that drugs were always herbs, and this is what they had, and this is what they used. Nowadays, they still use herbs as a basis for a lot of drugs, but what they do is also create drugs in a laboratory. I remember one drug, it was used for menopause symptoms. It was Premarin, and I believe it came from the urine of a mare. I believe I read that somewhere. So, you know, it came from different sources. Of course, it was always processed and everything like that. But now they go into a lab and they process drugs electronically and use laboratory experiments, and they combine different substances together to get the drugs that they want. So these are the newer drugs, and they are actually amazing, and some of the things that they can do. I know that there are some people who don't like to take medication. You know, let the body heal itself. And I do believe that the body does heal itself in many instances. The body can, if given enough time. Time is the factor, though. If you're suffering from something that's like a cancer, you can't wait until the body tries to heal itself. You have to get in and take action, because some of the cancers are very aggressive. If it's a sore throat, if it's a viral sore throat, they don't want to give you antibiotics, because the antibiotics that they give will it won't work. If you get a real illness that's much, much more serious, the antibiotics will not be effective, because the germs and the bacteria and the viruses that you have that make you sick can adapt to them. And then they can change their structure to adapt to them, and then the medication loses its effectiveness. That was always a problem with AIDS. With AIDS, the infection got used to the medication used to eradicate it, and then the medication lost its effect. And I can remember years ago when it was thought that 1 out of every 4 person would eventually have AIDS. I don't know if that's the case now. The statistics may well have changed on that. But you can get so, germs and bacteria and viruses can get so used to medication that they actually change their form, and now they're antibiotic resistant. MRSA is antibiotic resistant, I believe. MRSA is a condition or an illness that you get usually from nursing homes, and it's got a very, very long name, but they call it MRSA, and it's almost impossible to kill it. And then I understand that if you go in a nursing home for a period of time, that you've got it, you know, it's that prevalent that you can't avoid it. If you have a good immune system, then your body will fight it off on its own. If you do not have a good immune system, then MRSA and other viruses as well will overcome any resistance that you have and then make you sick, and there's a possibility that you will die. C. diff is the same thing. C. diff is a terrible illness, and a lot of times it's caused by taking too many antibiotics. And it's an intestinal thing with intense diarrhea, and it's very, very hard to lick. They have certain substances that they give you IVs of it, and it seems to fight it off, but if you aren't careful, it comes back. And it's sometimes very, very difficult to contain it, and there are a certain number of people, a few thousand people every year that die of it. So in terms of antibiotics, it's better not to use them if you don't have to, but if you have to, use them. And if you have to use an antibiotic, by all means, use a probiotic. If you use a probiotic, that helps to maintain your intestinal health so that you're not so likely to get a complication such as C. diff or something else that's just as bad. Drugs causing dependence, as I said, usually cannot be obtained legally. And in the past, all the medications were, as I said before, given to you through herbs and things like that, natural things. I can remember my mother telling me about a book that she had, and I wished I could find it, but I don't have it anymore. And it talked about how to heal cancer and various illnesses through the use of grape juice. And people who got on the grape juice or ate a lot of grapes seemed to get better from a whole host of illnesses, and there were case studies presented and so forth. Now, that may be an old wives' tale, but she had that book. It was called The Grape Cure. I don't know if anyone can go into the archives of a library and find it anymore because it was a very, very old book. But it was called The Grape Cure, and how healthy grapes were in making you healthy. If you were sick, they did a lot of good for you. Now I notice on television they're talking about the superior beets. They take beets and they take substances from the beets and they process the substance from the beets. I don't know which one it is. And it's supposed to do an awful lot to keep your blood vessels open, to give you energy as a various health drink. Now, I can't attest as to how successful it is, but I know they sell it on television and they sell it on some of the home shopping networks, and it's supposed to be very, very helpful. It's supposed to open up your blood capillaries so the blood can flow through easier, and it has a lot of other health benefits. So, but they're not using the whole beet. They're taking substances from the beet and processing it. I actually bought some. I didn't like the taste, and I didn't feel any extra energy, but I only used it once, so maybe I should give it another shot because it's doctors that are promoting it, regular MDs, so there might be something to it, and I just kind of missed it. So we still do use drugs that come from animal sources. Opiates they use poppies to get opioids, and all new medications have to go through a long period of testing before being approved for human use by the Food and Drug Administration. When a drug is approved, the drug can be marketed and it will be given a brand name. And the manufacturer has exclusive rights for 17 years to use that brand name. And after a certain amount of time, other companies can produce the same drug and they will give it a different brand name, but it's basically the same medication. So what I'm going to do, I think I'll close it here because I need to get into this more deeply, and so therefore there's no way that I can really get into it without cutting off something in the middle. So I'm going to close it here. We're going to continue with medications. Remember, I'm not telling you what drugs to use for what. That's up to a doctor to do. But how are the drugs classified? Because they are all classified, and they have a chemical name, and they have a brand name, and they have the manufacturer's name, and all of this. And you need to understand this to understand the medications that you're taking. So I will continue with this next time. So we'll close it here. Please join me then.